popular demand, I'm going to show you how you can wet sand and polish your car in order to get rid of orange peel. Now before we go any further, and as always, if you see any tools or products used in this video that pique your interest, I'm going to put links to where you can buy them for cheap online down below in the description box, so don't be afraid to click on them and check them out. So in my previous video, I showed you how you can repaint the hood of this F-150 due to damaged paint. I showed you how you can sand down and fix the damaged area, then apply primer over that area and then sand that down. After that, I showed you how you can apply base coat to that area and then blend it into the rest of the panel. And at the end, I showed you how you can apply clear coat to the entire panel. And all of this was done using nothing but rattle cans. Now as far as what is exactly orange peel, well, orange peel is when the texture of your clear coat looks like an orange peel like we got here. Now as far as how long you should wait after spraying clear coat before you can wet sand and polish it, well, that's going to depend what type of clear coat you're spraying. If you're spraying a decent quality 2K clear coat using a high volume low pressure spray gun, then you can usually get away with waiting only 48 to 72 hours for the clear coat to cure before you can start wet sanding and polishing it. However, we sprayed 2K clear coat out of these cans. Now given that this is also a 2K clear coat, I was going to polish this car after 3 days, but the clear coat on this car was still soft and it hadn't cured enough in order for us to be able to safely polish it. In fact, do you see these sanding marks here? These were not made by sanding paper. I simply used my hand and I was able to not only sand these, but put a bunch of scratches all over this clear coat. So now it's about 9 days later after we applied our clear coat and I feel more comfortable wet sanding and polishing this panel now. Oh yeah, and if you have to use these 1K crappy clear coats that you really shouldn't, you really need to wait at least 2 weeks before you wet sand and polish. Now for those of you that are not familiar with what orange peel is all about, I'm going to take a quick minute and explain to you what it is and how you can get rid of it. Alright, so fresh out of the factory, all the panels on your car are going to be completely bare. Now in order to protect these panels against rust and corrosion, usually a self-etching primer or an epoxy primer is sprayed on the bare panels. Next, after the primer, the base coat is sprayed on the panel. Base coat being the coat that gives your car its color. And between all the different coats, the base coat is going to be the thinnest coat that's sprayed on your panels. And after your base coat, clear coat is sprayed over it in order to protect it against corrosion and sun damage, but also to give your car that nice shiny gloss. Now clear coat being the thickest layer that's sprayed on your panels and also being in the semi-liquid state, it's not going to cure exactly flat. Your clear coat is going to cure wavy and like this, which is going to reflect the light as if it was getting reflected off of an orange peel, hence the name orange peel. And as far as how we can get rid of orange peel, first we need to sand down flat this top portion of our clear coat. And once the top of our clear coat is sanded down flat, we're going to polish it in order to bring back its shine. Now in order to be able to wet sand and polish your car, you're going to need some 1500 grit sandpaper, a soft sanding block like this, a medium to high grit rubbing compound of your choice, and either a rotary polisher like this, or better yet, if you can afford it, a slightly more expensive dual action polisher. And also you're going to need a clean wool pad or a cutting foam pad like this. Now for this video, I'll be using this rotary polisher, but I'll touch briefly and go over the benefits of using a dual action polisher, especially for beginners, later on this video. Alright, so before we start wet sanding, it's very important to make sure that the area we're going to be wet sanding is completely clean. So next you want to get yourself a clean bucket of water, and then get yourself some car wash soap, and then pour that in. Then get yourself a microfiber sponge, and then thoroughly wash all the panels that are going to be wet sanded. What you want to do next is to get yourself another clean bucket of water, and with a different sponge, thoroughly wash and clean your panels once more. Next you want to get yourself a microfiber towel and then wipe down and dry off all the panels you just washed. Alright, so what we just did, basically cleaned the surface of our panels of loose dirt and debris. Now if you were only going to wet sand our hood, this is all you would need to do. This is, again, newly painted obviously, so therefore it's very clean. But we're also going to wet sand and polish the adjacent panels to our hood so that our newly painted hood doesn't stand out too much on our car. Now since the clear coat on these panels is obviously a lot older, we need to thoroughly clean it of any specks of dirt, dust and debris that have etched themselves into the clear coat. And you can tell they're there because the sound of my hand rubbing against this paint is different than when I rub my hand against the newly painted panel. So in order to get rid of that, you want to get yourself a clay bar and then knead it with your fingers and flatten it out like this. You can also flatten it out using the palm of your hands as well. The idea is to get it to a shape that looks like this. Then grab the detailing spray that hopefully came with your clay bar and spray it on the panels that are going to get clay barred. You can also spray some on the clay bar itself. And then simply go to town. And you'll know when you've cleaned an area because when you start off, see, it's kind of coarse and you can hear it. But after a while and after you clean it up, you don't hear the dirt being picked up by the clay bar because it's already gone. And here's a close look at all the crap that this clay bar was able to get off this panel. So once again, we'll grab our bucket of water and wash down our panel. You guys see a trend here? And then get yourself another microfiber towel. Then dry off your panel that you just clay barred. There we go. It's not as smooth as a baby's butt. And the final step before we start wet sanding is to get yourself some 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch tape and tape up all the edges on your panels so you don't accidentally sand over them. Also, if you have very sharp body lines on the hood itself, it's a very good idea to tape them up as well. Now the shape of this hood right here does not really constitute a sharp body line, but you want to be very careful right at the corners. Because when you're wet sanding, if you go over these lines like this, you can quickly burn through them and damage your clear coat. Same thing can happen around the edges. But even a bigger danger is when you start buffing, especially with a rotary buffer. You know, if you're not careful, you go over these edges, you can quickly burn through the clear coat and ruin your newly painted panel. Here we go. All right, so here's how you want it to look like. I'm also going to split this panel down the middle so we have a good before and after shot as well. So next we'll grab our soft sanding block and wrap our 1500 grit sanding paper around it. And then using a sponge to add some clean water to our panel, we can start wet sanding one section at a time and paying close attention to the contours of our panel. So for example right here, you don't want to wet sand like this. You want to keep your sanding block flat, go up to the edge, and then if you want to sand here, again, keep it like this, sand this way, then keep it flat on this side, sand this way, so on and so forth. And the good thing about these soft sponges are that you can every so often get them out and use them to clean up your panel, to take a look and see where you need to sand more. And good thing we checked because as you can see, we're pretty much done. That was a little bit quicker than I expected, and it shows that this clear coat is still fairly soft. Now you can sand this a little bit more to get it even more flat, but I don't want to risk burning through this clear coat, especially not on camera. So now we do this for the entire panel. And as I've said before, you're going to need a lot of elbow grease for this. And if you're wondering where elbow grease comes from, the main ingredient for elbow grease comes from alcoholic beverages. What's that? You guys saying something? Chop, 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 chop. All right, you twisted my arm. Brain freeze. Ugh. All right, let's do this. See, this is 100% elbow grease right here. Alrighty, 30 minutes later, here's what we have. As we talked earlier, I was careful not to sand down too much around the contours of the hood. And on the adjacent panels, I decided to sand down only halfway. This way, it blends into the rest of the panel. Because if you sand down the entire adjacent panel, then that's going to stand out from its adjacent panel. So next, we're going to start polishing. Alright, I should have washed this wool pad earlier, but since I haven't, I'm going to try to clean it with this screwdriver. You basically grab the polisher like this, and then after you start it, you make sure you put the screwdriver and run it across the wool pad on the side that's going away from you, like this. Because if you put it on the side that's turning towards you, it's going to grab it out of your hand and probably jam it right into your eye. Alright, similar to sanding, we're going to do this one section at a time. So we get our rubbing compound and apply it to one section in the form of an S. Then we'll spread that around with our wool pad and then start from a low speed. Spread it even more around, and then we'll pick up some speed and rub it. When you're using a rotary polisher like this, it's very important that you don't stand in one place. You need to be constantly moving back and forth. The speed at which you will be moving is going to depend greatly on how fast you're going to set this to turn and also what condition your clear coat is in. Since this clear coat is somewhat soft, I'm going to move faster, and I'm also not going to run this at too high of an RPM. And you might need to go over each section about 3 or 4 times in order to get it properly polished. So here's how this area looks like after our second run. But this area is still going to need another 1 or 2 passes to look good. Plus, the rest of the panel obviously needs to be polished as well. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alrighty, minus a few spots, we're pretty much done polishing these 2 segments. And here's a closer look. As you can see, there are still some fine scratches left, but those are just from our wool pad. We could remove these later using a swirl remover and the proper foam pad. But other than that, it looks pretty nice and shiny. Before I remove the tape and show you the before and after on this panel, let's quickly go over the dual action polisher I told you guys about. If you're going to be using a dual action polisher after you sand down your panel with 1500 grit sandpaper, you should also sand it down with some 2000 grit sandpaper after that. Because these dual action polishers, aka random orbital polishers, not only turn this way, but at the same time, they turn this way in orbits as well. As a result, when you use one of these, you don't create a whole lot of friction and heat, and it's harder to polish 1500 grit sand scratches. You would need to spend a whole lot more time polishing using one of these, doing the same job a rotary polisher would do. Also, if you want to make your polishing job easier, after 2000 grit, you can also follow that with 3000 grit sandpaper. Alright, enough talking. Let's unwrap our present. Alright, so let's take a closer look. Here's a section where we haven't wet sanded and polished. That's the reflection of my shop light. Here's before, after. Before and after. Again, from this angle, here's the reflection of the light. Here's where we polished. And here's where we haven't polished. Here's where we polished. Not polished. This will be good. Try to see whether you can read the letters on this bottle. Here's before. After. A lot more clearer now. And here's a look at our fender. Here's the area where we polished. Here's the area that hasn't been polished. Now, as you can see, our newly painted panel doesn't stand out too much from the area that's polished on our adjacent panel. And there you have it, folks. Painting this hood with the rally cans came out pretty good, especially after wet sanding and polishing it a bit. Now, if you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put a link to that, along with some other videos on this side of the screen that you can click on. There will also be links in the description box down below. Hope you enjoyed watching this. I'll see you guys next time.